Hello and welcome, fellow Wasteland survivors. I'm Dean. Thanks for stopping in, hanging out with me today. This is part 2 of our electrical tips and tricks video on the U.S.S. Enterprise that we built at Abernathy Farms. Now, in the last video, I really kind of lost track of how much content I had. And I could have put a little bit more of this in that video, made it a little longer, and this one a little shorter. I'm sorry this one is a little bit long, but we had a lot of content to cover, and I really wanted to get it all in. So, quit messing around here, Bones, and let's get started. Alright, now where we're at is on the second floor of our saucer section. We've got a lot of doors in, and what my plan is here is to make several rooms. I need to be able to open and close the door. Normally what we would do is put a switch outside and a switch inside. But since we are abusing the size glitch already, I really need to do this where I'm not using as many objects as usual. Now we have a regular electrical switch. They are connected to a delayed off switch. We've got two electrical conduits on the floor, and I've connected on a carpet on the floor, and we're connecting them to our switch. What we're going to be able to do is carpet glitch these into the wall, and then we will connect one of every one of these conduits together, creating one long chain. Now what the second conduit is for is to help us create fields inside of each one of the rooms. So when we switch on a switch, that conduit will become active and light all the lighting up in that particular room. And so each room has to have one itself. And here we're just connecting one of the electrical conduits up to each other all the way across all of our switches. Now, I have these on a carpet for a reason. The reason is I can really move them anywhere I want to up until 4 floors when the wire breaks. By doing this, we're going to be able to place them up on the ceiling outside. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take a second, program our delayed on poles, or off poles, to 3 seconds. Now when I flip the switch on, the door will open, and 3 seconds later it will close because the delayed off switch goes off. Now we could have used logic gates to do this, but once again, it just would have been a whole lot more objects than I needed to place in. Doing it this way, all we've got in is one switch, one delayed off switch, and 2 electrical conduits. We'll actually even take the carpets out later on. Okay, now it's time to move these carpets up on the ceiling. I've already went up there and laid a couple of quarter floorboards down. This is going to allow me to snap these quarter floors down here onto them. And I'll put one of these carpets on a quarter floorboard and send them upstairs. Now that we're up here, we can go ahead, pull the carpet off, and place it where it needs to be placed to, maximize in hiding the wires the best that we can. Now, I did try to put a second carpet on these and insert them into the wall, and it really looked good out here, but all it did was make the wires down in the lower saucer section stick out of the walls. So we did move them back, and we're just going to leave them like that because we're never going to see the top of this ship unless we walk up there. So it's going to be a lot better visual to have them out of the way. Alright, the next thing we're going to want to work on is our transporter room. Now originally when I first did this, I put the switch in sideways so you would be at the switch looking at the transporter, but when we moved the contamination chamber in, or the decon chamber in, it was in the way and I had to move it. Now what's really cool about this is our field that we're going to make can actually be accessed by that door. I didn't plan on that, it just worked out. Okay, now what we're going to want to do is take out a couple of objects so we can add in our power. Originally, it was going to go across over to our power room, which is just in front of those blue doors that are part of our transporter chamber. But I didn't like all the stuff hanging out, so we're just going to run it over here to this back wall and put in its own generator. Now we'll hook up the decontamination chamber. That'll always be on when power is on. And then when we switch our switches on and off, it stays on, but our lighting will go off. Alright, now we can go ahead and replace our wall back on the side of the elevator. Had to take it off because the electrical conduits aren't exactly straight, and I couldn't just put it right in there without it penetrating into that wall. That's why we had to take it out. Now we'll go ahead and continue a couple of more conduits over into this little blank area that we have walled off, and we can hook a generator up to it. Now, real quick, in case you guys don't know this, if your generator seems a little loud, shut it off, turn it back on. It will run smoother and it will run quieter. And I have noticed 3 different modes that generators run in. Now, I don't know if this works with the Fusion Core generator because that already has a pretty quiet sound to it. But all the other gas ones that works with. Okay, now that we've got our power hooked up and our field is active, since I've already added in the electric, I need to go around and highlight and click on every object that requires power so that it will activate it and be on this field. And I got one more light I'd like to add in with these, the disco ball. I think that'll give us a pretty cool look on the doors, and wow. Okay, I got that lined up the first time. That's crazy. It is lit up in here pretty good, but that still does give us an awesome look. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the disco ball, attaching it to lights, if you move the light that it's attached to, the disco ball will move with it as well. Alright, now we can see all the lighting on its field. Looks really good. Once again, I did intend for more lighting to go in here, but because we have really exceeded the build size, we're just limited to what we can do. Also, we've got the decon chamber, so when we come in, we can get rid of any radiation we've picked up while we've been out playing. Okay, what you guys have all been waiting for, getting down to engineering and wiring up our really cool little warp core engine that we've built. Now, we did see it, or get a pretty good look at it in the other videos. So we're just going to gloss over this as quickly as we can, so that way anybody that hasn't seen those videos can hopefully keep up with what we're doing here. We're going to be running an animation on our warp core engine, so we needed to install a couple of conduits in the back before we put it in. Now, outside, I've already made the jig for our the first light boxes of our warp core engine. We used this round container to do it. Once again, the other videos kind of showed how this worked. So we're not going to really spend a lot of time on it here. We'll put up the final last light boxes, plus we'll need to go ahead and wire them. I did mention this in the other videos. It is easier to wire them from the outside than it is the back, because you can see how tight that is back there. Now, we did add on an extra piece to our warp core engine. I did take it out later on, but I thought that you guys would enjoy to see how I actually created it. It was extremely simple. Just laid out a floor, a couple of these connections, and then just set and adjusted them by hand back and forth until I was able to get them, lined up the best that I could. They weren't perfect, but that's okay. Nobody would ever notice, and, it's just still going to look good. Now, you could maybe use the boards, to line them up and whatever, but once again, I don't think it's off enough that anybody would ever notice. I didn't notice. Okay, and the next thing that we did was grabbed a couple of the larger light boxes and just used group select to line them up to the ends of the conduits. In this fashion, it looks like it's connected to the end of the conduit. Wiring it was a breeze, just a quick wire glitch and had them all connected up. Now we've group selected this object and we're bringing it over into our warp core engine. And I'm just going to line it up the best I can and place it in there. Now it's time to go ahead and grab our light that we're going to insert into the middle of the warp core engine. I'll take a few minutes here and line this up. Now originally I thought this might be a nightmare to move, but it turned out to be really easy to move that in and out. All I had to do was just snap another conduit onto it as a marker, take that out, set it down on the ground, because the conduit will set on the ground, and then did whatever adjustments I wanted to, then replaced the light back in on that conduit. Okay, we've got the wiring all hooked up from our big light boxes into the center, and even though it does look cool, I don't think it looks good for what we're doing here. So even though we're seeing it, the final build, they were not there. Okay, now it's time to hook up the animations to our light box. The very first line will be connected to the very bottom row of light boxes. It'll also be connected to the very top row of light boxes. And since we have 4 light boxes on the bottom, 4 light boxes on top, but we've only got 3 poles of animation coming in, the closest light boxes will be connected up to number 1, 2. So when 1 comes on, the top and bottom row of light boxes will come on, and the very middle row of light boxes. And then row 2 will just be connected up to the second conduit, row 3 connected to the third. The optimal way to have done this would have been to run 4 lines of animation back here. But I am really trying to skimp on how many objects I'm putting out, and that's why we just went with 3. Now I've also got a pretty good idea to light up the background, and we're going to use the recycling lights to do that. I'm going to put in 3 recycling lights, and they'll be connected to each row of light boxes that these conduits are connected to. I'm going to change the color of them to purple, but one will be light, one will be a little darker, and then the one will be the darkest. And hopefully the effect that we get will be a light to dark background effect. And as I'm hooking up the last recycling light here, as you can see that I'm having a little bit of a problem there, but we'll just use a wire glitch and connect it. I'm just having a hard time finding a wire to use to glitch the wire. Okay, now in a previous video we saw how this worked as well, but since it is electrical, we're going to go over it again one more time. These electrical conduits, you can float any wall-mounted ceiling off of them. And we're going to go ahead and place a couple of these office lights up until we've covered the whole entire line of electrical conduits. This is the first part of our computer console, and that'll be the light shining down. So now that everything's all up, we can get started on wiring this. Now, one thing that was cool about this is these lights are actually connected to only one of the conduits, or you can float the conduit or the light off of itself. And if you notice, I just took all those conduits out and the lights did stay in there. And this is a great thing because I was able to change some of the wiring up without taking any of the lights out of it. Now we'll go ahead, put up a couple of these electrical conduits. We're going to have to use a wire glitch to connect these, but we'll go ahead and connect these wires to the ends where we'll be connecting this computer build up to the electric that's already in our build. This is the other side. We've got a few conduits up there, and now all we need to do is go ahead and place in whatever light boxes that we want to use. I've got a couple of light boxes up on the top. The bigger ones, they require 1 power, while the little ones just require power. Now, this is one of the main reasons why we had to change our electrical for the bridge. Because of adding in these extra lights, I had needed way more power than I could stick into the front of the ship. Now, I could have carpet glitched a bunch of generators together, but when you start doing stuff like that, you will get problems. And that's why we just relocated to a different area. Now, we'll just take our littler light boxes here and just randomly connect them up any way that you want to. The point is, here is when one of those electrical conduits become active, 2 or 3 of those lights in the small light box animation will light up, and it should create a pretty cool blinking look. Okay, now that we've got all that done, we're ready to go ahead and start installing where the power will come in to the ship. I've made this little conduit setup. It's got 3 different lines to it. The top line will be connected to a switch, as well as the second line. The bottom line will be connected directly to the generator. It will have power all the time. Now, one more thing I needed to add to this is 3 of these wire junctions. And I just used our little tip of moving the conduits around to line them up. And I've placed them at the end of this setup, so when I group select it, they come in with it. And you can see all 3 of those are right there at the end, but they're not connected to anything. This is what our animations in our computer consoles and our warp core engine is going to run off of. So we need to connect them up. I'll use a wire glitch, and then we'll just go connect them over to our computer consoles. And we'll have to do this 3 different times. Now, because of how close I've got those junctions, it is a little hard to target them. But with a little work, I finally got it. Excuse me. And we'll take a look to make sure our wires are running correctly. Sometimes using the carpet glitch, they'll connect to other objects. Now, the very first or top line of the conduits we just installed will be on a switch, if you remember right, and it's connected to that electrical conduit. That sends power up into the rest of the ship, and we can turn that on and off. Now, I need to run a couple of more conduits in a different direction, and they would cross over these other conduits we have on the floor on the left. Now, the conduit would set on the floor and cross over them, but I don't like them penetrating each other. So by using the floor, we can lift it up just a little bit to run our conduits in the direction that we want. And we don't have to worry about these conduits laying in the other conduits. Once again, because we have sized glitched so heavily, you just run into all kinds of problems, and this is one way to stop some of those problems. Okay, now the next few segments are going to go by pretty quick here. The first thing that we're going to do is put out a couple of logic gates. We're using the AND logic gates. Got a little picture up. We're going to use it as a circuit board. The next thing that we need is some laser tripwires. As you can see, they set on the floor nicely with those electrical conduits. But because you walk over the conduits, you can't actually trip the wire with it down on the floor. So we need to put it up on this floor board, or a quarter floor. We'll connect it to pure power. Then we'll put out an electrical conduit and connect this laser tripwire to that as well. When this tripwire is activated, that electrical conduit will come on and create a field for us. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is connect our 3 lines of animation on the floor, which run to the other side, and the ones that we've already put in. We also need to connect these 3 lines up to the black side of our logic gates. The red side is where you put your 2 inputs, whether it's power or not power. The black side is the result of what you get when you connect those two uh, connections up on the red side. So each one of our animations will need to be connected to the black side of the logic gates. All right, real quick, before we get back to the logic gates, and I'll explain some more on those, let's program our interval switches. This is a 5-pole continuous animation. We're going to be using 3 lines of it to get the effect for our animation. Now, I've also placed in 3 more sets of conduit lines, which run out to the front of the ship. We're going to take each one of the switches, bring them in wherever they fit, and connect them up. Now, 3 of the poles of our animation needs to be connected to the logic gates on the red side. This is one of the sources for the logic gate. Also, we're going to connect 1 line to one of the conduits down on the ground as well. So this animation is actually going in 2 different directions. One is to the front of the ship, and then one is to our computer consoles and warp core engine. Okay, now I really spent a lot of time figuring out how to do this, so it was very easy visually to see how this works, and this is the best I could come up with. But right here we can now see that all 3 of our 5-pole animations are connected into 2 different spots, each pole. One is to these electrical conduits down on the floor. The other 3 lines are going to the red side of our logic gates, which are the AND logic gates. Now this line here I will connect up to each one of the red side of the logic gates. What the AND logic gate does is when it receives 2 different powers, and it can actually be from the same power source, then it'll actually transmit power. So when our animation comes on from our switches, that's one source to the logic gate. The other source will be a pure power, and they'll be coming from another laser tripwire. When that laser tripwire is activated, it will send power into the logic gate, and since the animation is running, then so now will the logic gates. Now I did have to add in a little extra here. We put in another line. I got to have a pure power source coming down here so we can create a field here as well. And I'll just attach an electrical conduit to a couch. It's completely out of the way. This connection is also connected to a few of the light boxes up in our computer console. Alright, now I had to replace or remove the laser tripwire, and it won't. Okay, this is something to know about the laser tripwire. You cannot move it any way other than group select. In other words, you can't carpet it, it doesn't set on a floor, etc. So now we had to do a few modifications there and add in that extra line of power. So instead of 3 lines, we've now got 4 conduit lines running on the floor. Okay, let's take a little closer look here. First of all, we've got 2 of our lines that need switches. The first switch is connected to the top conduit line, which runs all the way down here, and then is connected to this white electrical conduit, which runs up into our build, up into the top saucer section. The second switch is on the second line, and it only goes as far as it needs to by these switches. One of the delayed on switches is connected to it. One of the interval switches is connected to that. Now we've got 3 lines coming off of our poles to the bottom electrical conduits. They're going outside to the front of the ship. When the switch comes on, those will automatically be on. But we've got 3 lines running to the red side of our AND logic gates. Now, when this happens, I can run the animation in the front of the ship without running anything else. Now that our other power line is connected to the red side of the AND logic gates, as soon as I trip that laser tripwire right there, it'll send power back to this junction, which will give it the second source of power that it needs. And once it receives that, then all of the signals that our animation is sending in here will be transmitted into the rest of our build. And we just take a quick look down this side. You can see how some of the electrical conduit is running. And now let's see if it's going to work. And holy crap, would you look at the lag we got now. Okay, even though we got no lights running, the lag's pretty bad right now, the frame rate. But we can see our logic gates are still working. They are just not transmitting power until we connect up our raw power so that the tripwires come on. So I'll just add a wire to that, which is our bottom line. If you remember right, I said that was our pure power. And now you can see our laser tripwires are on. Once I trip this first wire, then that field would be activated. Now I trip this one, the fields in this area are activated, as well as our warp core engine. And you know, the more I look at this thing, the more I think it looks more like a satellite or something, you know, like Sputnik. Maybe that's what we should call it, Sputnik. Well, anyways, our animation isn't working correctly. I think somewhere back where we've connected our animation from our interval switches up to our logic gates is incorrect. We need to swap them around somewhere. Also, once we retrip the laser wire, all those fields go off, as well as our animations. Okay, I think we've got everything working pretty good, so let's go ahead and tidy up the front of the ship, get everything back in. Just going to use a carpet, bring the generator in, line it up the best I can. Did try to position the switches to fit in there a little bit. It's a little off, but, you know, I don't think nobody's going to ever notice that. Hey, Bones, that switch is off. Okay, now we can go ahead and close everything off so we can't see it. We'll add in a few walls on the sides, one on the top in front of the generator, and then we can go ahead and put our elevator back in. Now, the way that this is worked out with our raw power right here, all I have to do is just go ahead and wire glitch it, and I can go straight through the wall right to the elevator. And if any time I ever need to pull this in or out, that wire is right there in easy access. We're just going to use a locker to cover those corner areas later on. Okay, now if you had watched the first part of the electrical of this build, you heard me say that I had a lot more ideas for lighting to go in than what I got in. Now, I was able to briefly kind of show this to you guys a little bit. Even though this actually didn't make it in, we can maybe hopefully from this see what I was trying to get. What I'm doing here is I'm creating fields, and I'm placing these neon dashes up in different orders in the different fields. And as I change from field to field, I'll just go ahead and add in whatever color of these neon lights that I think I might like, or even if you tried this, whatever you like. And once again, you could even place these neons over each other to create other colors as well. But we're just seeing a couple of little looks here as I'm placing in the different fields and a couple of different colors. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time here because this wasn't going to stay, and you don't want to waste a lot of time. So now we're getting a really good look at it here, other than the frame rates are off the charts. The first tripwire lights up this first area, and then as we enter into engineering, this laser tripwire will turn on all the fields and our warp core animation. Now, I did adjust some of the wiring, but it's still not working correctly, even though it's wired correctly. What I did is, here in just a second, we'll see another clip of where I just shut the power off and turned it back on, and we got a whole different effect. And here it is right here. Yeah, see, it's a whole different effect altogether. So it's got nothing to do with the electrical, it's got everything to do with how much we've glitched this settlement. I've lost track, but I think it's beyond 3.5 times its normal size. But now we can kind of get a look at some of this neon lighting, how it's flickering off and on the different fields. Once again, it is not working correctly either. So here in just a second, I'm going to show you another segment where I just switched the power off and on, and you can see it's working entirely different. And this is that particular segment. Yeah, we can really see how that animation is quite a bit different than what we just seen. Even the light boxes on the side are blinking differently. And once again, all this was I just turned the power off and turned it back on. When I first started this project and was wanting to show you guys, I was originally all about the Enterprise. Once I started working on the rest of the settlement, with the greenhouse and our stores, the living quarters, the bar, I knew that I was going to pay for it at the end. And I really should have kept the build to this part of the build instead of the rest of the settlement. But, it is what it is. It's too late to cry in the breast milk now. But, overall, it still looks extremely good. I had a lot of fun building it, and I had a ton of fun making these videos, and hopefully giving you guys some really good ideas on how to make some other sweet things that you might want to make in your settlements. Alright, everybody, well, that's it for today. Thank you for stopping in, hanging out with me. The only thing left now is the walkthrough. Hopefully that'll be out in a couple of days. I've still got a few more fill-in clips to make. Alright, everybody, thank you. Once again, I do really appreciate it. And just like always, please, until next time, stay safe and peace.